What happens when two successful entrepreneurs get together for a drink? They talk shop, of course. So grab your favorite cocktail and sit alongside Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso, two seasoned business leaders that have driven their own companies to success, as they share from their experience and dive deep into the secret sauce that can turn a company around. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hey guys, Vince Moiso here with my friend Scott DeLong. This is the CEO Podcast. Today is a great follow-up to our previous podcast called Leveling Up, and we talked about what it meant to be an executive or to be in executive leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, we felt it was important to follow that up with, well, what's it mean to be a frontline manager? You know, what's it to be, you know, what does it mean to be in middle management? What's it take, right? And what does leadership mean in frontline management? And Scott, I know you have an incredible background on this, and I know you have an entire workbook that you spent a lot of time on. And there's a lot of topics that we've talked about that in other podcasts that are super relevant to this specific topic.
We've actually talked in the past about how we promote people. The good individual contributor gets promoted to a manager and then left hung to dry.
That's what we said last time. Yeah.
Not taught anything about management or leadership or any of the things, and said, hey, you're great at this. And what that ends up doing is that ends up creating the micromanager.
Yeah.
You're really good at that thing, so you're going to overlook my shoulder to make sure that I'm presenting you well, right? Because you've got to give this to your bosses. And you're a performer, right? So what happens is you just default to the thing that you're really good at, right? You know, especially you know what we discussed when we talked about that track. You know, we talked a little bit about that track to leadership, right? It starts with management. It starts with frontline management, and you know, oftentimes a company doesn't spend the time to develop or train or, you know, really describe the role appropriately, you know, make the responsibility very clear and say, here's what it's going to take for you to be a manager. You're kind of, you know, same thing. You're kind of left on your own accord. It's a little bit of sink or swim, right? I think it's more than oftentimes. I think it's almost always.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You promoted somebody and then you got to give them faith to go do their thing, and we let them on their own, and they're just not prepared.
Yeah.
There's so many nuances on differences between getting the work done and getting others to get the work done, and the relationships that happen with that and how they change as well. So yeah, the course that I put together, Leadership for the Frontline Manager, talks about all of those things.
Well, let's start here. Why don't we just start with understanding the role of the manager?
Sure. So what we mean by that is that you get promoted into this position, and now you need to know what does that mean? What it means you're in charge of these people. And that's about the extent of it.
Right.
You're in charge of these people. Work's not going to change. We're going to still get all these things done, and all of that. And I think it's more than that. I think it is the role of the manager. And I don't just talk about management. I talk about leadership. So there's a lot of overlap between the two, but they're not the same.
Yeah.
So I want to start when we're dealing with younger people or first time going from an individual contributor to supervisor or manager, whatever that leap looks like, is to make sure that they understand the difference between leadership in this role and management in this role as well. And the role is to get work done through and with others. Okay. It's really as simple as that.
Yeah.
But there's more to it than that. There's just a lot more to the work that has to be done. So,
well, I think let me stop you there for just 1 second, because I think what you really hit on is awesome. It's the difference between leadership and management. Yeah. And great, you can be a leader without managing anybody or managing anything. Right. So, you know, there's so many ways to lead. You can lead by example.
Gandhi was a leader that didn't manage anything.
Yeah. And so what we're talking about here is when you get into the term management, and we want to understand that term at a high level, is I'll break it down like this. You're managing most likely a department. So there's something specific about that role and responsibility. And more importantly, you're managing people. You are now responsible for other people. So I like the word versus being in charge.
Right.
I like being responsible for others and being responsible for something that is bigger than you at that point. So you've got,
and it's more than their work product that you're responsible for. So if you go back to some of the earlier podcasts, we talked about the employee experience.
Yeah.
You're responsible to make sure that employee wants to continue to be here.
That's
Most
exactly
employees quit their job because of their next line manager and the way that they get treated or not treated by that person.
True statement.
That's why they leave. They don't leave for money. Yeah, money's a factor from time to time, but if you have a poor manager, you are looking for a new job.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Well, and I think that's what ultimately ends up being the most challenging, especially we talk about the high performers that then get thrown into or thrust into a management role, and they just don't know how to manage people. A lot of people, I love it because I'm taking my team through the Challenger sale, so I don't know if you've read the Challenger sale before. It's a great model. Just something for another discussion, maybe potentially another podcast. But what's interesting about that is they categorize the types of salespeople, right? The relationship manager, to the challenger, to the lone wolf,
sure,
right? And I want to talk about the lone wolf, right? The lone wolf is often a high performer, right? They actually do very well. So even though they might be disconnected, they're typically high performers, and those are often the ones that get hired into that sales manager position, and they're like, holy shit, man, I don't know how to manage people.
Yeah.
I've been running my own thing over here, siloed.
Well, that lone wolf also has a bigger problem, and that's why before you promote them into this, if they can't manage their internal customers, who's taking the order, who's delivering the thing, who's doing all those other pieces, the lone wolf is awesome with customers.
Yeah.
And they often suck internally.
Well, let's talk about this for a second. So the challenge of moving from being someone's associate or peer to now I'm your boss.
Often overlooked and shouldn't be. So here we are working together, and we're going to lunch together, and we're hanging out, we're complaining about the boss together. That's what the frontline worker is doing. Right?
Now you're the boss, so I can't complain about you
now
anymore.
all of a sudden I'm the boss.
I can't even have a drink with you anymore.
So there's multiple problems with moving from peer to boss. The first one is the relationship with the person that you're close with.
Yeah.
The other one is the relationship with the other people because you're close to this person over here.
Yeah.
Right? Favoritism.
Oh yeah.
All those kind of concepts, and there are very specific things that you can do to manage that without busting my personal relationship with you.
Yeah.
And making sure other people know that this is a fair process that we're going to go through.
Yeah.
So it's really important, and it's probably the topic that is most overlooked in this when we get, and it's different. And who it's really hard on, the person that got promoted, because their relationships have changed.
Right.
And they don't get it. They're still the same fun-loving person that wants to go have lunch with their friends and all of that. And it is a really emotional toll that gets taken on the person that's been promoted, and nobody's helping them.
Yeah. It becomes a challenge, right? I mean, and that's just normal. I think that's if I say, I always tell people, careful what you ask for, right? If you want to be in leadership, it's important to understand what comes with that. The responsibility, the role, the shift in how you show up at work, and like what we're just talking about is that all of a sudden now you're the boss, right? So
you don't think you've changed, but they do.
100%, right? It's just automatic. It's that it comes with the title, and I think people. It's funny how often we diminish title and its importance, but titles are important both internally and externally, and then there's a perception that comes along with it. And because of that, you do have to make that shift. Sorry to tell you that, but there is a shift that you're going to have to make. You can't be everybody's friend all the time. And some of the relationships you have doesn't mean you can't continue to have relationships, right?
No.
The relationships are just different.
Yeah, they're different. So I'm going to go back to that title being important. And I think here's the link that I think why the title is important, because the title means power. It changes the power dynamics. And that's when you talk about leadership versus management. If we figure out power, how to minimize, how to maximize, and use it when it's appropriate, that's more than half the battle right there. Mm-hmm. So that's something that people need to, if you want to study stuff, study power differentiation, how to minimize power, how to maximize power, when to use it. If you want to study one thing, if you're growing into that leadership position, understand what power does to people and to your perception from other people towards you as well.
So let's talk about communication.
Okay.
So how does communication change? I look at it. I look at it this way. We've talked a lot about communication. Yep. We've had a two-parter podcast on communication. I think you could venture to guess that communication is important to us. And it's a critical part of the role of a leader, as well as if you're moving into management. And now all of a sudden the communication has to shift because, you are now adding the component. Before you were managing up and you were managing lateral, right? Now, once you become that frontline manager, I'm managing down at the same time. So now I'm managing down, I'm managing lateral, and I'm managing up. And how does the communication shift?
So I'm going to change that from the perspective on that from shift, because if you're a good communicator and learn how to communicate well, it's really not a shift at that point. Although most of us don't communicate well, so it definitely is, and how to do that. So the thing about, we have a whole course on effective communication. Yeah. It is 11 weeks, it's intense, and here we are trying to do it in one chapter, right? In one week's lesson. Yeah. So basically the art of communication is this: the recognition that what I say is not what you have heard and interpret. That's probably the most important piece of this when you're talking about the new manager is you don't walk into a room and say, okay, here's what we're going to do, team. Everyone understand? And everyone nods their head yes, because they all believe they understood what you said. Finding out what they heard, what they're going to do next, what's the next steps, and finding out what their perception of what you said is. It gives me a chance to reframe right then. No, it's not quite what I meant. Here's what I meant. As opposed to, great, next Friday, everyone comes in with some different interpretation of what I wanted or what we needed or any of that. So,
well, just do this. If you're in management right now, right, and you're listening to this, here's what I urge you to do. Get 3 or 4 people that you work with in a room, give them direction. Don't ask them to repeat anything, nothing. Just give them direction. Just say, hey guys, we're working on this concept and I'd like you to do this, this, and this, whatever, and see what you get back. And reality is you're most likely going to get back 4 different things. That's what's going to happen.
With a group of 6 people, 4 different things? You're being optimistic.
No, I'm saying grab 3 or 4 people.
Oh, 3 or 4 people, 4 different things. Okay.
You're going to get all 4 of them. Are going to bring
your
back
whole department.
No,
like you have 4 different interpretations.
No, everybody's bringing something back different. Everybody's bringing something back different. Even if it's just a little bit, it's different. Well, and then I would urge you then do it again. But at the end of it, you're going to say, you're going to outline each of the items, right? So you're going to be clear, item 1, item 2, item 3. You're going to clarify, and then you're going to ask them to repeat back what they heard, and what they understood. And I'm very keen on that myself. So I practice what I preach, and I'm always in a conversation, and I'll end the conversation and I'll say, this is what I heard from you. Mm-hmm. This is what I understand as the action items.
Paraphrasing it.
Is that accurate? And then I get, that's accurate. Great. Then I know that I understood it properly.
Yeah. Doesn't ensure 100% success on good communication, but it sure gets you a lot closer than whatever otherwise.
Get you above 90%. There's no question. Yeah.
And here's the other part about communication, and we've talked about this a lot. Don't email communication stuff. If there's any chance, any potential for any misunderstanding, conflict, disagreement, any of that, pick up the phone, walk down the hall, do something closer to that hierarchy of communication, face to face, and than Zoom or phone call after that. And there's even, I just read something recently that in our old hierarchy we had email right in the middle, right below the phone call, and above text. And now I'm learning and hearing and watching that text may be a higher form of communication than an email.
Yeah.
And here's why. In order for me to text you, I have to have some sort of relationship with you for you to give me your cell phone number.
Yeah.
And while you can't get as much out in a text as you can in email, it is more personal, and it generally requires maybe a little difficult, an answer faster than an email does.
A more immediate response.
Yeah.
There is some speed in there.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit here, and let's talk about a topic that I personally love, and that we've talked about before, and that's accountability.
Yeah.
So what's it mean in terms of, as we talk about, as we're giving advice for the frontline manager and we're talking about this leadership role, how does accountability fit in?
Well, I say this a lot, and I joke when I say it, but I go back to some old Dr. Phil stuff when I say we teach people how to treat us.
Yeah.
And if I'm not going to hold you accountable, why should you even bother? Right. And therefore I have no recourse. If I've allowed that line, the lines of boundaries on what's acceptable and what's not to shift from time to time, that's confusing for you.
Yeah.
What can I get away with this time?
Yeah.
Or what's required this time, depending on your point of view on that. So holding people accountable may be, besides communication, may be the most important thing that you do as a new manager. Mm-hmm. Holding people accountable.
Yeah.
Communication, I still put at the top. It's still my favorite thing, but may be as important as properly communicating to everybody.
We'll talk about, so for a second, so what is, so let's just say for argument's sake that we agree that, communication and accountability are right up there as the top priority for any manager. Okay. So how are they holding people accountable? Like what's the trick? Like, what's the appropriate?
Yeah.
So, are we talking about harshly accountable? Are we talking about browbeating? Are we talking about,
So I use a different technique, and you'll see this if you come into a meeting with me. Every meeting that I do starts with laying out what the expectations are going to be. By the end of this meeting, here's the purpose, and here are the outcomes we're looking for.
Yeah.
And at the end of every meeting, I end up with, here's what we need, from who, by when. All right. So if you ever get into one of my courses, the first day, what we're going to do we're going to tell you what we're going to talk about and all of that, but we're going to set some ground rules. Mm-hmm. You're going to set the ground rules. I'm not.
Yeah.
Now, I may lead you to what the ground rules that I want are, the use of cell phones, whatever those rules are going to be. But if you set those rules, if you said, I'm going to do this, I now have commitment, not just compliance. We talked about that before too. I'd much rather have a commitment from you than just compliance.
Yeah.
So if we've done this properly up front and front loaded it, the accountability is done by you, not necessarily by me. Now, it's still incumbent upon me to follow through, and if something doesn't happen, to say, hey, didn't we talk? Wasn't that one of the things that you wanted to? Wasn't the agreement we made?
Yeah.
And guilt plays a big factor in this.
No, I love that. I agree with you on this one, and I love what you said about the who, what, where, when, and why. Right? Yeah. Like, so when as a manager, as a leader, like at any level, especially as a frontline manager, if you are clear, you bring clarity to expectation, right? Whether that's just a project or whatever that might be, I'm going to tell you the what, I'm going to tell you when it's needed and who is responsible for that. And
being a good manager, you're not going to tell me how.
No. So, but right? When you bring clarity, then it's easy to have accountability.
Yeah.
On top of that,
I don't have to do much to hold you accountable.
Correct.
When you've made the deal.
You bring clarity, we get agreement, then it's very easy to hold people accountable to that. Yeah. On top of that, like what you said, which really resonates with me because it's how I work within my organization, it's allowing that organic accountability to happen. So if you've got all your team working in that way consistently, right, and the communication is consistent and the expectations are consistent and there's clarity on the expectations, right, I don't have to be the one to hold you accountable. No. Your teammates are going to hold you accountable.
So that's a good term, the word team. All teams are a group, but not all groups are a team.
Right, sure.
Right. So there's a lot to building a team and all of that. But that's the key, is that let peer pressure do its job.
For sure.
You're not going to let those people down, right? You might let me down. We had this previous relationship, and you can work me a little bit and all that. You're not working all of them, because they're being held accountable as well, and they're going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
So I think if you build this team concept when you're the manager of a small group, right, and you have less to do to hold people accountable, because the others will help you,
guys,
or call you out if you don't.
Oh my God, the best managers actually don't really have to manage all that much. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. I had one of the best calls, and this is a great segue into the next thing I want to talk about. So I had a one-on-one today, and it was great, because this person just basically said, "Hey, I want to review something with you, and I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say," right? And they just talked themselves through it. Oh. I didn't say a word. I just sat back. They talked themselves through it. They said, "This is what," and I just nodded. And at the end, it was like, great. And I was even thanked for the meeting, and we just moved on, and it was just beautiful. I loved it. I was so proud in that moment, because that person got
I had a very similar situation 2 days ago with someone I'm coaching. They asked for some. We had the agreement, right? Here's what we're going to commit. Here's the commitment that we made to each other. Yeah. And they asked for, like, because of this, I want to be able to do that instead. What do you think? Yeah. In an email, which, first of all, don't send me an email if you want to deal with conflict, right?
I totally agree.
And I have no authority over this person. I can't hire or fire, but I'm the coach, right? I can't hire or fire this person. Yeah. So here's what I did. Nothing. An hour later, the same person sent me another email revising the first one. Here's what I did. Nothing. I let that go. Now, I'm a good communicator. I like to respond to people pretty quick, as you know, but I didn't. So we got into our face-to-face, and at the end of this coaching session, I said, "So let's talk about those emails." She goes, "We don't need to." Why is that? I solved the problem. But what was the problem? I realized and recognized that I made a commitment to you and to others, and I'm going to honor it. I didn't have to do a thing.
End of story. So beautiful. That's such a great story. Yeah. I love it. Well, let's shift into how important are one-on-one meetings. So I just used the example of the one-on-one. So talk about that.
Yeah. I think, and we have a little bit of disagreement on this, because we've had this in a previous podcast that I remember, and you think there's other things that might be a little bit higher, but I think this is the most important thing that you can do for your people and for retention of your people, and that is to hold the one-on-one meetings regularly on your calendar, and nothing gets in the way, barring death, barring major catastrophe. Yeah. It's not shifting, and it is going to be held, because it is important for me to hear you.
Well, I am in agreement in the situation. While I might, prioritize other things or rank things a little bit higher than that, at the same time, I do think one-on-ones are sacred, and that should be held on your calendar. And that's part of owning your calendar that I talk about. And I do think that they are very important. And I think, holding that time on your calendar, it is so sacred, and you've got to respect the time that you have there. And you have to realize that people that are reporting to you and looking up to you as the boss, as the manager, as a leader, they want that time with you. They do want that time with you.
They may dread it from time to time,
but they want to be heard. Yep. They do want to be heard, and they want to be coached.
So So my one-on-ones are different than most people's. Mine are completely reversed. When I'm teaching, I call it a flipped classroom, where the students are leading the class, and I'm just kind of facilitating that. But in the one-on-ones, it is not about my expectations of them. is about their expectations of me and the organization. I want to hear from them first what it is that's on their mind, what difficulties they're having, what problems that I've created for them, what conflicts that might be there, to let them fully, even if, let's say the one-on-one scheduled for a half an hour, even if their issues take 25 of those minutes and I don't get to my issues, the issues that I want to make sure I talk about,
theirs are more important.
I do that.
Yeah.
And the reason that I do that is because you said earlier, people want to be heard.
Yeah.
And if I believe, and I've watched this happen, so I know it's true, that if I let you talk through your things and you know that I actually care about those things, doesn't mean I agree with all of them, but I care about it from your perspective, your point of view, you are going to loosen up. You are going to soften your approach. And then it's an opportunity for me to do the coaching, counseling, managing process that I can do.
I agree.
So
I follow
don't
that
skip the
format.
one-on-ones and make it about their needs for themselves and the organization, as opposed to my needs for them, for the organization. That comes, I have a list of things that I want to talk to about, with the person as well. And we prepare for these. I give them a sheet and I fill this out so that you're ready to know what you want to talk about. I fill out my sheet. And if we don't get to mine, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I got other times to walk by and tap them on the shoulder. Hey, what's happening with that report? Right? Things like that I can do throughout the week. But the one-on-one is their time, not my time.
Yeah. I agree with that. I follow that same format.
Good.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's the way to do it. I think that's great advice. Okay, let's finish up with I don't know. I feel like we could do an entire podcast on this topic. Yeah. And it is employee reviews and performance improvement plans. Yeah. So when you talk about employee reviews, the question I get a lot, in companies that I've coached or consulted for, how often is a question. Is the frequency important? What's the structure of it? Okay. Should it be documented? Yep. Are we focusing on the positive? Do we need some feedback? How do you word it? What's the language? There's so many questions around that. I feel like I hate to end with this because we're only going to spend a few minutes on it, but at the same time, it deserves probably its own podcast, right? It
does. And I'm going to give you a philosophical answer on this, as I think, I believe this. If I'm doing my job, the leadership job, not the management job, if I'm doing the leadership job all along, which includes holding people accountable, setting the expectations and boundaries, the one-on-ones, the proper use of the one-on-ones, the employee review is a formality. Yeah. It's a formality because we kind of have to do it. This is how we give a raise. This is how we do that.
I completely agree.
I think the coaching and teaching and training, coaching and teaching for the most part happen during the one-on-one portion, and not in a rebuttal when you're telling me your problems. But this, right? Not that, but the opportunity to reframe things and get people to see things from a different point of view, and make sure that they understand that the company has expectations as well. So that's something we need to do, is make sure that there are expectations and boundaries within these relationships, certainly. But the employee review is important simply because somewhere in our employee manual, we said we're going to do this once a quarter or once a year. And if we don't, we hold ourselves up for litigation. So what do you do during that employee review? Well, first thing, you come prepared, and you have the employee come prepared. Most of the people that I deal with deal with their annual increases and bonuses, and they do that at the employee review time as well.
It's appropriate time to do it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But you have to do your homework, and the employees should be doing their homework as well. Totally. So I like to provide them with a document to say, here are the things that I've accomplished. Here are the struggles that I've had. Here are the major wins. Here are the minor wins, all of that, so that they're fully prepared to have a discussion and rebut anything I might have to say, which is great. I need to be able to do the same thing, to say, here are the expectations that we had. Here's where you exceeded those. Hey, that's great. Thank you. And here are the things that we're on target with, and here are the things that we need to work on for next year. And that's where employee improvement plan can come in. Although the employee improvement plan, the performance improvement plan typically is a way out the door, not really for improvement.
Yeah, not always, but most of the time.
It is a formality in case we need to let you go. We've gone through these steps. However, I've seen them become effective as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. So when we talk about the PIP, one of the things that I do is it's not all one-sided. It is how I am going to support, how the company, are going to support you in the things that we need from you in order to get you to the next spot.
Well, you should do it with success in mind.
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies do it the opposite way. And I have experienced that, and I've done it poorly in the past. And I've learned from that. And I think you should do everything in your power. If you're leading properly, you should be looking at, if you've got an employee, I'll refer to Jocko Willink and extreme ownership. And if you've got an employee that's not performing, who do you think you should be looking at?
Well,
you should be looking at yourself.
Understanding the reasons they're not, and most of those reasons probably are me.
Yeah, there's no question.
I didn't set the expectations. I didn't set the boundaries.
No, if you buy into
communicate properly, all the things we talked about up front.
And if you buy into that extreme ownership concept, then you should be pointing the finger inward, right?
Yep.
And so my point is that a performance improvement plan you should really look at that as, hey, I'm going to do everything in my power at this point to set this up for success. So the other thing is I want to agree with you completely with regards to the employee review, and in fact share that I used to do it quarterly. At some point I that was way too frequent, because if I'm doing my one-on-ones, if I've got my daily huddles, if I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do, I don't need that level of frequency on employee reviews. I shifted to semi-annual, and then I was like, God, even that's too much, because I really don't need it if I'm doing all the things that I need to do as a leader and as a manager. And really, I shifted to annual. One time a year, an employee review is sufficient if you're doing all the things you need to do as a leader.
So let's go back to the one-on-ones really quick, because there's something I think I forgot to mention, is that at the end of those one-on-ones, I should be taking some notes as well. There should be some documentation on the things that we talked about in a file, because there are times where employee relationships just don't work out.
Yeah.
And you need to protect the company. Yeah. You need to protect the company as well. Yeah. And if you're doing the employee review only once a year, you better have some documentation along the way as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people need to be gone. It just works out better for everybody.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Well, that's what we got time for today. So I hope you enjoyed that discussion. There's so much more we could go into. As you mentioned, Scott, you have a whole training course on this, and I would personally encourage people to check it out at leadtogoals.com, and you can find all sorts of courses that Scott offers. He is an expert in a lot of things.
Thank you.
Not everything. It's a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm not really good at golf. Let's go with that.
Okay. So don't.
But I will be.
Don't let that get to your head, my friend. Anyways, so we appreciate you listening. As always, we'd love to hear feedback from you. So check out theceopodcast.net. Give us some feedback if there's a topic that you're looking for. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. To learn more about Scott and Vince, please visit theceopodcast.net and check out the calendar to tune in for our next episode. While on the site, you can also listen to past episodes, access additional content created for our listeners, and if you would like to dive deeper into any topic, there is an option to schedule some time with Scott or Vince. Thanks for listening.